Hello friends and welcome to Smart Coach. Today we will be focusing upon the role of vernacular press. Alright, how the vernacular press has been instrumental in the Indian national movement. Alright, we just won't be talking about the generic role of the vernacular press, of course. The Indian national movement, what is its relationship with that, and we will also look at the evolution of the vernacular press per se. Alright, now when we are talking about Indian national movement, we know that one of the primary causes behind the rise of the national movement itself is vernacular press. Alright, is vernacular press as a cause of Indian national movement. Alright, as the rise of the nationalistic tendencies within India, it was fostered by the vernacular press. So therefore it becomes pertinent for us to know how the vernacular press it developed in India. Now for that we'll have to trace it back, or we'll have to trace back the development of publishing tradition in India, and this the modern publishing and modern newspapers in India was first started by James Augustus Hickey. All right, James Augustus Hickey. Alright, he is considered, and rightly he is considered, the father of Indian press, because in 1780 he started the first Indian newspaper, modern newspaper, alright, Bengal Gazette. Bengal Gazette. However, when we talk about the impact of the Bengal Gazette, it did start the tradition of printing and publishing in India. However, it did not start any kind of tradition of nationalism. It was not critical of British rule. It was more of a gazette which used to advertise different commodities which were present in the market. It was more advertisement than any kind of propaganda or any kind of spread of knowledge. The real pace of Indian publication is picked up through the socio-religious reform movement. So through socio-religious reform movement, the press in India comes to its own. It comes to the forefront through the socio-religious reform movement. So therefore when we are tracing the history of vernacular press or press in India in general, we have to talk about certain phases. So when we look into it from that perspective, we will see that first of all there was the beginning of publication in India, which was carried out mostly by Europeans and missionaries. So you can also talk about this phase as a missionary and European phase, which are mainly controlled by Europeans, and they were publishing for the European community or maybe to spread their missionary activities in India. However, the second phase is entered when socio-religious reform movements and their leaders take up literature and publishing as part of their social work. They publish these magazines, they publish these newspapers in order to inform people about the evils of Indian society and try to rid Indian society by educating the masses. So this phase, we can talk about it as the socio-religious reform movement phase, and it is in this phase when one person in particular takes forefront, and that is Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Because it is under him that such vernacular newspapers. Now by vernacular, what do we mean? So before we proceed, before we go into discussing vernacular press, by vernacular we mean those languages which are not standardized or standard use of official of government use or official government use, or those languages which are used regionally and locally. Now these languages which are non-standardized, these are known as the vernaculars. These are used regionally. They might be of regional official use, but centrally they are not of official use, and therefore they are known as vernaculars. So in India, vernaculars would be Bengali, Assamese, Gujarati. So these kind of languages would be considered vernacular languages. So if we are talking or tracing back the history of vernacular languages, we have to talk about those newspapers and those magazines or those publications which came out in the vernacular language. In this field also, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the pioneer. Why? Because one of his first publications was the publication of a weekly newspaper, by the name Sambad Kaumudi, which was in Bengali, and the publication started in 1821. It was followed by a Persian journal by the name Mirat ul Akhbar, which was published in 1822. too. Okay, so he pioneered the publications in vernaculars also, and his you see activities were taken on by many such reform activists. All right, among them Dadabhai Naoroji, who was also working for Parsi reform, published a newspaper, okay, which was which argued for change, okay, Parsi social change or social religious reform, known as Rast Goftar, which literally translates into the truth teller. All right, this was published from 1851, which was also important, and it was published in Gujarati, Anglo Gujarati. All right, so it used to contain Gujarati and English. Okay, so this is also very important. So therefore we see that in the scheme of development of vernacular newspapers in India, the Rajgoftar is also important. And now proceeding forward, in 1872, another achievement in vernacular press was made when the magazine, Bengali magazine by the name Bangadarkhan or Darshan, all right, speaking in Hindi it will be Bangadarshan. So this newspaper, it came up, all right, and this newspaper was culturally very important and also important in the scheme of development of Bengali language as a cultural landmark of the people of Bengal. All right, it was discontinued after a while, but then again in 1901 it was revived by none other than Ravindranath Tagore. All right, Ravindranath Tagore, he revived the Bangadarshan. So it is culturally very important to the people of Bengal and to the entirety of India for the development of Bengali identity. And then of course going forward, we see that during the phase of nationalism, certain vernacular literature becomes very crucial, and these literature include such publications as the Amrita Bazar Patrika, published by Sisir Ghosh. All right. So these newspapers, they started to take the forefront, and they were very instrumental in developing a critique, a systematic critique of British rule in India. All right, because they used to relentlessly criticize the British policies in India. Okay, and this criticism of the Britishers and their rule over India, the criticism of colonialism, because they were published in vernacular language, they were accessible to everybody who could speak in those languages. All right, it was very accessible, and it is because of this that the you see, these kind of publications, they constituted some of the major threats to British rule in India. Vernacular literature was again taken up by some of the most instrumental you see leaders in the Indian national movement, such as Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who published the Kesari, which was published in Marathi. All right, and it also was a anti-colonial publication. And then of course, talking about the publications in the vernaculars, how can we forget Mahatma Gandhi's contribution in the form of the Hind Swaraj. All right, Hind Swaraj, which was first published in the Gujarati language. Okay, Hind Swaraj, which was first published in Gujarati language, and in which Bapu elaborated his ideas about Swaraj, his ideas about Western civilization and Eastern civilization, how Eastern civilization was morally superior, what Satyagraha as a means of political protest against the British rule in India, what it means. All right, so all of these ideas of Mahatma Gandhi are encapsulated in his publication Hind Swaraj, which was made in Gujarati, and which is very instrumental in the development of Indian nationalism and spreading the idea of non-violent Satyagraha. All right, so thus we see that vernacular press in India, it developed through certain stages. All right, it went from being part of publication, okay, not just vernacular press but press in India went from being a part of European domain. All right, it went into the masses took over it in the vernacular form. It was used by the social reformers, okay, then it was used by the nationalists also. So it took its time to evolve into a potent tool against British colonialism and to spread the idea of freedom and nationalism in India. So now we will look into its main important role in the Indian freedom struggle. Okay, so what it represented to Indian freedom movement. Well, now let us return to the role played by the vernacular press. And when we are discussing the role of the vernacular press, first thing that we have to do is argue from the point of view of efficiency. All right, so compared to something published in English, all right, or maybe something published in some certain very standardized language as Sanskrit, which of course does not happen, but I am just making the point of view clear, alright. Something maybe which is published in English or Sanskrit will not have the same kind of reach as something which is published in Bengali or Gujarati, alright, or Marathi, alright. So, vernacular languages had a wider reach because it was the language of the vast majority of people, alright. People did not speak English or Sanskrit or some such standardized languages, but people did speak the vernaculars, and it was easily accessible, easily understandable, and therefore it the word which can be printed in vernaculars spreads far and wide, alright. And arguing from the point of view of efficiency alone, we see that the vernacular press was therefore very instrumental in very instrumental as a tool of nationalism in India, because whatever is printed in vernacular, it has a very wide reach. Now secondly, if we talk about a second point of the importance of vernacular press, the vernacular press, it liberalized democratized spread of ideas, alright. Therefore, we see that the vernacular press, since it had the tendency to democratize the spread of ideas, alright, which we have already seen in the argument from efficiency, that ideas can spread far and wide through the vernacular press. We see that it democratized the spread of idea, and also what happens because of the democratization of spread of ideas, it is because of this particular tendency of vernacular press that we see that the vernacular press was seized upon by the socio-religious reformers, alright. So, the socio-religious reformers very efficiently used the vernacular press to spread their ideas of reform and education in India. So, talking about the vernacular press, don't just focus upon its importance to the Indian national movement, but at the very beginning stage when socio-religious reform movements are coming up, and when India is finally realizing that it has to modernize itself, alright, and has to come at par, okay, morally as well as intellectually with the West, when such a realization is happening in India, it is the vernacular press which is seized upon by the social religious reformers in order to spread their ideas, alright. So, this is also something which is instrumental or pivotal in the career of vernacular press. Thirdly, when we are talking about the impact of vernacular press, we have to know that nationalism itself, it found a platform in the vernacular press, alright. What is going to constitute the Indian nation, alright? What is India? These kind of ideas, what is the nation, what is India, alright? How do we know that we are Indians? These kind of ideas, contending ideas about nationalism itself, alright? What constitutes a nation, how is India a nation, all of these ideas are played upon on the platform of nationalism, on the platform of vernacular press itself, alright. So, various you see intellectuals from within India and various national leaders from within India are seizing up on the vernacular press in order to spread their own ideas about the nations, alright. For some, of course, it can mean a Hindu nation, for others it can mean a Muslim nation, for some it can mean a nation in opposition to colonialism. Whatever be their ideas, they seize upon the vernacular press as an instrument to spread their ideas, to talk about, to debate upon the issues of nationalism itself, alright. Now, most importantly, when we are discussing the impact of nationalism, impact of vernacular press upon nationalism, most importantly, it is also the tool of propaganda, and it is also an instrumental tool when it comes to organization and activism, alright. So, suppose you are calling a hartal, on the 6th of April, how do you spread the news, all right? How do you organize the masses, all right? How do you propagandize against the colonial rule, all right? You have to have a platform to criticize colonial rule. Where do you find that platform? You find that platform in the form of propaganda in the vernacular press, all right? Because the vernacular press is a wide reach. It can teach people about the negative effects of colonialism on the Indian people. Again, now you have spoken about the negative effects. Now you want to organize a movement against colonialism. How do you do it? You use the vernacular press, all right? And then how do you guide your activities of this movement, whatever movement you are planning? Activism also through vernacular press. Much like nowadays, in certain areas you can see the use of Facebook. In certain areas you can see the use of social media in order to give rise to movements, all right? Positive and negative both, of course. So much like you see the use of social media, vernacular press was a medium which had wide reach, and therefore this was used by Indian nationalists in order to do all of these things, propagandize, organize, and then for activism also. So therefore it is the single most important point when it comes to the role of vernacular press in India, all right? And then of course, lastly, we should also discuss upon the important effects of vernacular press when it comes to internationalism. All right. So what is internationalism? Internationalism is a way of thinking about one's nation in the context of the world, all right? So any nation or no nation can survive in a vacuum, all right? It has to survive in an international scenario, all right? And international events are happening all of the time, and a nation has to pick up clues from all of these events. The vernacular press for the first time brought about a revolution in internationalizing the people of India. How? Because by letting them know of the different events that are occurring all over the world, okay, by getting them to understand what is the significance of these events. Suppose the Russian Revolution is happening, so the vernacular press would be reporting upon the Russian Revolution. What is the significance of the Russian Revolution, okay? So all of these events are narrated upon on the platform of vernacular press, and for the first time the vast majority of India who don't speak English but speak the vernaculars, they are becoming aware of the wider world, all right, that there is a world outside India and that important events are happening there, all right? So vernacular press is also very important when you look at it from the perspective of internationalization of India, all right? So that the India, for the first time, the vast majority of India came to know of the outer world and came to know of the significance of events happening in the outer world. So these are, broadly speaking, the very definite importance of the or very definite role of the vernacular press in India, all right? So I suppose that the video is helpful to you, and I hope that it helped you in understanding how the vernacular press evolved in India and what role it played in the development of nationalism within India, all right, by educating the masses as a socio-religious reform movement, as a mouthpiece for the socio-religious reform movement, by reaching out to the masses with new ideas, all right, and then by being an instrument at the hands of nationalists when nationalism itself was discussed, and then as an instrument of propaganda, organization and activism within India, and then as an institution through which internationalism was promoted in India. So this is the legacy of the vernacular press in India. And most importantly, when you look at the importance of or when you are asked to supply evidence for the importance of vernacular press in India, remember, although there were a number of restrictions on the press in India, one law in particular has lived in infamy, and that is the Vernacular Press Act, all right? The importance of the vernacular press in India is attested by the fact that the Britishers had to pass a separate act for vernacular literature in India, for the vernacular press in India, which occurred in 1878, but under the guidance of Lord Lytton, all right? It was repealed by Ripon, okay? It was repealed by Ripon, but then of course from 78 it started to operate up until 81, all right? 1881, and it was later repealed. However, we have to remember that this signifies the importance of the vernacular press upon the Indian national movement, all right? If it was not important, then this kind of an act would not have been necessary, all right? So with that, I take your leave. I hope the videos had been useful to you. So thank you.